Marketing, entrepreneurship, and all things small business. You're listening to the Profit 911 podcast. Now, here's your host, Justin Miller.
We did it. Episode 50.
Yeah.
Just under a decade to get it done.
That's right. Milestone.
It's been a couple years, probably.
Yeah, couple, right? 2.5 maybe? I don't know. They all just seem to flow seamlessly together.
Yes. So if you've been standing by, hopefully you weren't holding your breath because you'd be no longer with us.
You'd be purple.
But we didn't disappear. Life went on in the meantime.
It's been busy.
It was a little different, though. So, the question is, where the heck have you been? And, Kevin and I were on a bit of a hiatus on, I guess it's your main job. But we spun the tables. I was working for Kevin for a little bit.
It was like Dumb and Dumber, only we have some talent.
Well, yeah, not the mutt cut van either.
Yeah, no, we had decent transportation. That's true. Yeah.
So those of you that are Facebook friends with me undoubtedly saw that I've been following around the Iowa Hawkeye women's basketball team during their tail end of the season. And between that and family and, the business actually running itself, the podcast it fell too far down the list.
It's always right in the middle anyway.
Not that we do not value you listening. We love you listening. And, we'd love it better if you gave us some ideas for shows.
True.
But no, we're going to come up with some lessons here today for you out of what on earth we learned with the Hawkeye basketball team. So, Kevin, why don't you give the backstory on how this came to be?
Okay. So 2 of the radio stations I work with here in Iowa carry Iowa men's basketball. And after last season, the year before, the first season they went to the Final Four, we decided that we would carry women's basketball because in Iowa, even by then, it was bigger than the men's. And this year it became even bigger for sure. And at some point, I'm like, because I have a background in photography and used to do some newspaper photography and magazine stuff, I'm like, I kind of want to go and be able to, work, yet still be involved in what's going on. So we got credentials, and so I started shooting stuff. And at one point, you and I were talking about it. I'm like, well, yeah, I'd probably get you a writer's pass. And you're like, yeah.
I can probably write.
Yeah, you figured that out. I mean, we decided it was, I'm like, I don't want to buy tickets, but I'd like to be there. You're like, I don't want to buy tickets, I want to be there. So we decided to work. And yeah, I would do the photography and the social media posts, and you would write the sports stories, and we'd get them posted. And oddly enough, in a smaller town with a smaller radio station and a minimal web presence, some of these stories that we would do would have tens of thousands of web views.
Yeah, well, let's back up in case anyone buried their head in the sand for the past year. So,
who's Caitlin Clark?
Caitlin Clark, the phenom.
Yeah,
of course we're going to mention her. That's what people were watching, and she was selling out everywhere they went. Home games, away games.
Mm-hmm.
The home arena is called Carver Hawkeye Arena and holds 8,000,
like 15,000.
15,000.
Just over 15,000.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the WNBA stadiums that hold.
Yeah.
So they were selling out all that, and I was paying for tickets for a while, and they cost about $600 for a not so great seat.
The first time you said to me, I paid X amount for a ticket, I'm like, you know what? I bet I can get you a press pass. I bet you can come with me and you can work writing a story. And sure enough, got your credentials.
You're going to get all kinds of requests now.
Yeah, really.
For media credentials.
If Bailey Turner from the University of Iowa is listening to this show, he really is a sports writer.
Listen, Kevin would love to interview everyone for you.
Yes, exactly.
But no, so we followed the team. I don't know what I covered. Maybe 3 or 4 home games at the tail end of the season, something like that.
Yeah, we kind of ramped it up, and then we went to the Big Ten tournament in Minneapolis, which was kind of a cool experience. And then from there, we kind of rolled into, is we still doing this? And it's like, get into the NCAA tournament. And for me, I knew I would be there. But every time I would be like, hey, is your wife going to let you go again? Are we going to go again? Because I could, if I needed to, I could write the stories. But I'm like, if you're going to write them, then we can go. And when, we're friends, I'm like, tag along as long as you want.
I mean, there's a corollary lesson. We're going on a nice vacation, my wife and I, this summer. So this helped in the being away while having, 3 young children in school. But no, we kept following. And then, when it came to tournament time, where we covered a couple home games. So
first 2 rounds,
second round.
Mm-hmm.
And then they moved to Rochester.
Yeah, all the way to New York, which we ended up not going to.
That was a no-go.
Well, it's also Easter weekend, and like you pointed out, during the NCAA tournament, games are only a week apart. So you find out, oh, we're going to go to New York next week. Let's look for flights. Oh, maybe we'll stay home, So
it's flying out of Moline, Illinois added a challenge. So
even flying out of Chicago was nuts on 4 days' notice. So there was not enough budget for the radio station I was like, we can drive to Minneapolis.
Invited on the charter jet either.
Yeah, so I tried. I couldn't get us on. Yeah, not being part of the Associated Press, I wasn't able to get us on the charter.
Yeah, so the Hawkeyes made their way through the Rochester games. They continued winning and ultimately ended up in Final Four, which was in Cleveland.
Which was within driving distance, so we decided that let's drive. See, now that's where we disagree. I think anything isn't within. I mean, I would have driven to Albany, but I was like, that's ridiculously silly. You're like, no way. If it's over 4 hours, we're flying. Sure enough, we drove to Cleveland.
Yep, it was a long drive.
It was a long drive.
And we made all the way to the championship game there, and came in second ultimately. But the media gets you want to talk about some of the behind the scenes of the media? Because there's like some business lessons here. First off, let's talk about why on earth the media gets in free. Because this is, I think, a little different between, when we were covering things at the University of Iowa versus the tournaments. So
true.
To the University of Iowa, this is marketing.
Totally.
It's
free publicity. Yeah, it's free publicity.
They're trying to get students at the end of the day. I mean, that's the whole athletic program if you want to get down to it. But certainly the media side, and they go out of their way a little bit, as much as appropriate it seemed, it ramped up at the end there to be hospitable, to get good publicity and press.
Because to assist, again, we're working for a smaller news organization. And, if you're the Associated Press or if you're Sports Illustrated or whoever else, USA Today, you're going to get your credentials, you're in and out. It did help us that we had worked with the university all season long. So it was a lot easier for us to get credentialed for things like the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA tournament that if we had not shot all season, we would have had no chance. So you're right. It is for them. Okay, if you're on the list during the season, it was almost impossible not to be on the list for the NCAA tournament, which was very helpful. I mean, it was easier to get Final Four credentials than it was to get Big Ten tournament credentials. I mean, it's so once you're in, you're in.
I don't know. My seat was worse.
Yours probably was.
Up in the 200 levels.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's true.
Kevin was courtside the whole time.
Yeah.
Did you get run into at all at any of the games? Anyone?
I did in the national championship game. I got run into once, and somebody saw it on TV and texted me and said, are you the one that just got hit by that basketball? I'm like, yeah, that's me. Because I was underneath the basket on the one end. So in certain shots you could see. And then oddly enough, I'm like, when you talk about things, women's basketball and people getting excited, I was getting texts from people who I know are not really big sports fans, but were watching the national championship game because it was a big deal. And the whole Caitlin Clark is, changing a sport and all this. Like, I'm getting texts from people saying, are you in Cleveland? Is that you? Do I see you on TV? I'm like, I didn't know you like basketball.
Oh, yeah.
I do now. Yeah. So, I mean, it was amazing to me how many people came out of the closet are like, hey, I love women's basketball. I've been a fan forever. Really? You mean since like last October?
Yeah, I mean, I was a fair weather fan. We were following the tail end of last year and then this year for sure because it was like, oh, there's something going on here.
Yeah.
And to us here, geographically, this is close. So I'm like, yeah, this is probably not going to happen again. I'm, Coach Bluter, do your thing. But this is. It
was kind of really kind of a once in a lifetime thing. She's a player that you're not going to see that talent level again, probably, or at Iowa. Even if Iowa continues to be a really good women's college basketball team, probably never have that kind of generational player again. So yeah, it was a neat, and every time, once they got into the NCAA tournament, we would discuss this. You win and you go on. If you lose, it's done. It's like you and I would talk about like, well, if they lose, this whole thing is over. If they win, we're going to continue to road trip. And, which I think by the time it was all over, when we came home from Cleveland, we're like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Even the host organization ask every time, right? Like, if your team does not win, are you providing coverage?
Are you still going to cover? Yeah. Which we said yes because we'd already paid for the hotel. Like when you go to something like that, if Iowa had lost on that Friday night in the semifinal, what are we going to do? Pack it up and go home? No, we're going to stay in Cleveland. And because, Cleveland is a really fun place to be. We discovered there's lots to not do in downtown Cleveland.
Hey, they have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
We did enjoy that. You talk about some of the perks and the backstage kind of thing.
Yeah, let's talk experience. We'll just go Cleveland in particular. So
I thought Cleveland was kind of cool. You were like, we can't go over there. We're going to get shot if we go over there. I'm like, this is fine. Until tell them about the sign we saw in the parking garage.
Yeah, so we're leaving one of the garages, maybe, I don't know, a quarter mile from the arena, not far. And I believe the sign said, "Close this door behind you. You are our last line of defense," or something.
Yeah. I felt very safe at that point because all along the weekend I was like, "Oh, this is the safest city in America. It's great. We're fine." And you're like, "Read this sign." I'm like, "Okay, maybe not. Maybe we're literally like a quarter of a mile from this beautiful arena, which is next to the baseball stadium." I'm like, and we're not like 16 miles away where you would think you could get in trouble, but.
In all fairness, we didn't have any issues, and we were walking
Not at all.
around late at night.
Great food. We had fun. Went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but there was we got to go to an event at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame after the championship game for free. Got some food, some drinks.
Food. There was a catered meal for every meal.
There's catered meal for all the media at the Big Ten tournament, in the NCAA tournament. Normally, you don't have that stuff like at a regular game. At the University of Iowa, there's some popcorn and there's a Coke machine, and some water, but. Yeah, there was pretty good food at some of these places, and you get to see all these TV people who are back there working. You and
I take nothing away from the professionals that do this for a living.
Yeah.
Like, they were actually working hard, and it looked miserable. We didn't have to crank out an excessive amount of content.
We did what we needed to do.
I kicked out one story.
Yep.
You kicked out a lot of socials.
Yep.
After the break here, we'll talk about kind of the social traction because I think there were some lessons there for sure. But no, we had a lot more spare time than I would say most did.
We did a lot of people watching. True.
Yeah. And figuring out where our pass could get us.
That was the other thing. We can talk about that too. It's like, where can you go? This says you can go here, but can you go over there without someone saying you can't be here? Which isn't always the case, evidently.
No. It turns out, everyone there learned the rules at the same amount of length of time ago as you
Sometimes
did, so.
If you act like you're supposed to be somewhere, people don't question you.
This is not the takeaway. But
I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just saying, if you happen to be at a collegiate event where you're not credentialed to be in a spot, if you act like you're supposed to be there, sometimes you can just be there.
Yeah, you may or may not find your way to the locker room. Let's take a break. When we come back, I want to talk a little about the ESPN special. So I've seen it. You haven't. It came out over the weekend called Full Court Press. And also I want to talk about some of the lessons learned from on the court to be applied off the court. Because I was thinking of this. I almost wrote some of these while we were sitting there. But, we had popcorn to eat and stuff. So lessons learned from Caitlin Clark applied to business. Of course, she's not teaching business. She's a marketing major, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm sure most of that was just clicking through the computer. But she has an empire to run now, so hopefully I don't think marketing is going to be her problem.
You think she does her own marketing, though? You don't think she has a team behind her? I don't know. We'll find out. We can talk about that. Yeah.
All right, we'll be back shortly. We'll talk about that.
And now, back to the Prophet 911 podcast with your host, Justin Miller.
We're back. We're talking basketball. Business. Or the intersection of both.
Where they go together, yeah. I did, until you got all into it, I had no idea that you were like a big basketball fan.
I wasn't until last year. Well,
but it's kind of one of those things, you kind of want to follow it. It's intriguing.
So wasn't the sports entertaining, right? Like I played in junior high or something was the last time I played it. So the sport's fun. But it's the buzz around it. It's the community. It's the 15,000 people. It's the Apple Watch yelling at you that it's dangerously loud.
Yeah. Well, you've been to professional baseball or other games. Had you ever been to a college basketball game before, other than like at a local college?
Probably way when I was young.
See, the weird thing is I had been to like men's games, but have never been to a women's game before. So like my only experience at the University of Iowa was sellout after sellout after sellout. Like I didn't go to games 3 years ago where there were 6,000 people there. Every game was a sellout, and every game there are 4,000 8-year-olds trying to get down after the game to get an autograph. It's like, it is, you're right. It is it's parents wanting their daughters and sons to be part of this whole thing. And then media, the ESPNs and the Fox News and everybody else gets involved. But we got sucked up into it too.
I mean, it reminded me of pre-internet.
Yes. It
reminded me of like locally here, the equivalent of the minor league hockey team and, the baseball club and things that they still exist, but they're not what they were.
No.
Mid 90s.
But like the Mallards, the hockey team, when they won all those championships, it was like mid-level, lower level minor league, but it was like, you might as well have thought it was an NHL team in the Quad Cities. It was huge.
12,000 people, right?
Yeah.
There were people sitting in the banquet room watching it on closed circuit.
Yeah.
That's what it reminded me of. I think that's why it was kind of fun for me. Yeah, the game is awesome, and everyone's talking about it, obviously. But it was the energy and excitement that went with it. It was nuts.
Well, how was that different for you? Because I also remember like it was like the second or third game that you quote unquote covered, where you ended up coming to the post
that quote unquote
to the post game press conference. So like I had been used to no different than all the years of shooting concert photography, where you would be 5 feet away from a famous artist and you might hit some small talk. What was it like when you started coming to the press conferences and whether it's Caitlin Clark or it's another player and you're 4 feet away from them and they're like, what? Oh, she's real. She's right there. It is a more, because most people don't see that. They don't get to experience that. They see it on TV. And you and I are sitting there asking questions with people from, AP and Getty. And
I would say the first experience was the first one I went to in person, not the credential, but just as a fan, and that was neat because we've gone from TV to real life now. So that was fun.
Yeah.
And the game's completely different, by the way, in person than it is on TV.
Totally.
There's benefits to both, obviously, but, you
don't realize how long a timeout is until you, on TV, you think, oh, that's 2 minutes. When you're at a game, those timeouts seem to last forever.
Particularly the tournament. The games took longer.
Yeah.
And then there was a change again, then going to the media side, including the press conferences, of course. Well, you pulled my...
I'm like, wait a minute. See, this is how long it's been where I've got them backwards. Like, you're supposed to be 1 and I'm 2, and you're on 1.
You take 6 months off.
I know, exactly.
Gonna revoke the credentials.
I know.
No, so the first one, we were in the press conference. That was really neat. And, being that close to the players, my realization was, God, these are just kids.
They are. They really are. I mean, they're...
Which is lost on the TV, by the way.
True. They look,
and of course, the mass hysteria around it. So it brings it back down to earth real quick, and you start thinking of the people in a different way. Then as we continued to do it, the experience was fun, but like it becomes normalized like anything else.
It does. Yes.
So that luster, that feeling of awe and excitement, is still there. It's fun, but it's not the same as the first time you have that experience. And now, of course, I'm spoiled and going to any athletic event without
never be the
hospitality and
it won't be the same.
You want to go.
It becomes a situation where you're right. You're a little bit acclimated to it. And for you, because I'd been covering it all season, so I maybe did 10 or 12 home games. You kind of got into it at a time where before it could get too normal for you, then we're off to the Big Ten tournament. We got to go to Minneapolis. We got to go to Cleveland. We got to do this. But it's like, you're right. It becomes, you're like, wow, they're 19, 20, 21 years old, especially in the press conference where someone other than Caitlin Clark, the other players, when they're asked questions and they don't get interviewed every day. Sometimes when they would answer and they would pause, you'd be like, she's literally thinking of an answer because she is 19 years old. This is big for her.
Well, I will say Clark in particular is very polished and careful with her words.
Totally.
Beyond her years.
Because she was a star in her freshman and sophomore year. I mean, it just became big in everywhere else her junior and senior year. But you're right. She's someone along the line, somebody gave her some pointers and she took it and figured it out. Because she's, even now in Indy, she seems to be the center of attention and she just knows what to say, when to say it, and what not to say.
Yeah, and I think she's balancing it, though. So like in the ESPN special, the Full Court Press, which, by the way, I think is a funny title because, we watched, the Full Court Press here and she'd get irritated. But in that special, I think right now she's still... I'll say adapting. I won't say struggling with that constant spotlight, which isn't going anywhere, by the way. But you'll pick up things, and I pointed them out in the press conference to you. Some responses to questions that were asked that I think someone asked, what superpower would she have? And her answer was be invisible.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's incredibly telling.
Absolutely.
And she said something similar in the ESPN documentary. So I think she's realized and coming to terms with, this is abnormal normal.
Well, it's like if
you're
no different than if you were a huge music artist. Like everybody wants to be famous, everyone wants to be acknowledged, but at the end of the day, when you can't go anywhere without being recognized, that's cool. But the person who wants the autograph or the picture, it's their only interaction.
Yeah.
They don't realize that she's had to deal with 17 other people like you in the last hour and 8 hours a day. You and I actually got to the point where there's a police officer who works for the University of Iowa who, after a while, we figured out that his only job for the last couple of years is to follow her around. And eventually we get to talking. And once you know him a little bit, he'll talk to you a little bit. But we got a chance to talk to him a little bit. And he would then tell stories about, like, I'm like, tell me the worst story. Like, what's, and he's like, you'd be surprised how bold and how people, well, I'm your fan, so I expect you to, like, take a picture with me, or I expect you to talk to me or sign.
I think you said entitled.
Entitled, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he said. And I don't know. I mean, part of me says, if you're going to be famous, that's the price of fame. You're going to live with it. But she seems genuine. I also know a photographer that turns out in Iowa City who happens to know her a little bit. And of course, he's like, oh no, she's real. That's how she is. But I have not met anybody at the university. Of course, they're probably not going to tell me if they're not, but I get the impression from everyone I've talked to, including people in Indy now, as I'm still on the train, evidently, because I've got credentials to go to Indy and photograph her in Indy. I just want to go and kind of be part of that next experience. But
I go once with you.
Yeah,
on a weekend.
Yeah, on a weekend. No press coverage necessary. But everyone tells me that she is genuine, and she also takes it personally. Like, to her, it's bigger than the team she plays for or the University of Iowa. Like, part of her thing is she's changing women's athletics. That's part of her thing.
Yeah, she's got a lot of weight on her shoulders as far as that goes, and that's covered in the docuseries a little bit. And I'm wondering where that came from. So obviously it's there now, right?
Yeah.
And she is the face of the sport, and she's done very well with that. But at some point, it got put on her shoulders.
Well, don't you think the media did that? At some point, you go from covering it. What? Yeah, you get so much media coverage, though, that then you are suddenly deemed the future of the sport. Well, I'm sorry, I don't want that. I'm sorry, I can't have that.
Well, and I had spoke to you a few times about, how impressed I am that none of the girls on that team have any social media slips of terrible stuff coming out.
Nope. You're not seeing them at a bar downtown at 3 a.m.
Which they're going, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
In the special, the coach tells them in the locker room once during one of the tournaments, I guess it was the Final Four tourney, because they didn't cover the Big Ten one. They skipped over that whole thing. But it tells them to just, it was before the LSU game. It tells them to just stay off social media. Just ignore it. Put your blinders on.
Yeah.
And, I was telling you, and I'm guessing that someone was coaching them on all that, because they have lives. They have friends on social media. They're students.
Yeah.
And someone's going to post something stupid at some point.
Yep.
But
And
it didn't seem to happen.
I've never seen any of that. And whether that is that coaching staff, is that team policy, because you've seen other girls, LSU girls, they're posting 24/7. It just, I don't know. It was very interesting. And maybe that is one of the things you take away from, lessons learned from business, or, is that what you don't post can't hurt you. For sure.
Yeah. Let's talk about social media traction, because part of your job was actually getting coverage for sponsors here, and getting eyeballs on the stories and ultimately their messages. My job was to just write the story and call it a day. I did put the links in there.
You did. You did a good job.
You had some interesting observations on social media posts, and I know you were posting some reels on Facebook, and you would post throughout the game several times on the media pages, which I think media gets a little bit different rules on Facebook, but not a ton.
Yeah.
I think you get a little more authority and exposure
probably
than Joe Schmo business would, but certainly applicable still. So what did you notice that was getting seen? Because I thought this was interesting.
A lot of what was getting seen wasn't, not that game footage or highlights weren't getting seen, but it was the generic things that you can't see as a fan. It's the Saturday pregame practice at the arena the day before the national championship, or locker room stuff, or press conference one-off questions, or just like things that you don't see on the game on ESPN. I noticed, and those got significantly more traction than not that Caitlin Clark hitting a 3-pointer at the buzzer to win, or when she broke a record. Some of those things got, I mean, 1,000 times more views than our regular news stories on this website. But you're right. A lot of them were just innocuous things that you pregame
of just people shooting.
Pregame, like high-fiving each other or talking to each other on the bench. It's like the look behind the scenes, I guess, were. I know I'm not sure why I started posting those things, but when I realized that people would see them, and some of those would be, again, instead of getting 400 views, there'd be 24,000 views.
Yeah, and this is the social media algorithms. Facebook's doing it. TikTok's amazing at it.
That's the one place we didn't post anything. I didn't post anything on TikTok. Now I wish I would have, because I'm wondering, as well as Instagram and Facebook did, I wonder how TikTok would have done.
It would have found the audience. So this is like a rare exception in the marketing world where you can put the content and it finds the audience on itself.
And that was the other thing. It wasn't so much people that followed me or followed. So I would post on my own channel. I would post on the website for the media outlet, and it was about half and half. People that knew me saw stuff on my page, and then half of the views on the other stuff were people that weren't followers. But you're right, the algorithm found them, the tags found them, they're interested in whatever.
I mean, my whole feed got clogged.
I know,
with unknown entities posting
yes.
Content related to that, like every other post. So like a friend post, and then some miscellaneous outlet posting a video.
But that's the thing. If I tried to post about my wedding business, I wouldn't get that kind of traction at all. You know, it's crazy how when something is so big like that, it just had a life of its own.
Yeah. On a micro scale, though, you could put content out about weddings and local things, and it would hit.
It would hit, yeah.
So it's just really weird how that all works, but it's not to be ignored. There's definitely a lesson there.
Yeah.
And then unless you have something else, I got the biggest lesson of all here.
Which is?
This is the beauty of owning a business, is that we left during random days.
That is true.
With damn near no notice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess the lesson is about an accepting spouse as well, but
that is true.
From a business standpoint, it had zero impact, zero impact on operations, because I'm building something here that operates without me. The exact opposite of building a star like Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
I don't need to be known. I don't need to be in front.
It was one thing for us to go to a Thursday night game or a Tuesday or a Saturday, and that was one thing. But all the tournament stuff, I noticed you, unlike what I would have done, because I would have been nervous, you never seemed to check in much on the office. No one was calling you and saying, "Hey, Justin, we need." It was like, "Hey, I'm gone."
Well, they don't have the number.
Well, that's the difference between your employees and mine, is that mine know my number and will call me in the drop of a hat.
I would check email occasionally.
Yeah.
But as far as day-to-day operations go, I'm not heavily involved in it. I'm involved.
It's set up in a way that it runs without you, but when you're here,
my job's just different. So I'm not client-facing. My job's to support staff, develop staff, and strategy and stuff like that. So leaving for a few days does not have a immediate and drastic impact on anything, which is why we're in business to start with, I think, or it should be at least a factor.
No, exactly. And the difference between you and I with that was I was able to leave too, but I had to do a bunch of prep work before, so I could be gone from the radio station or from home or from other work stuff. And then I spent more time like checking on things than you did, but I still was able to be gone where I didn't have to worry so much, but I still had to be checked in once in a while. But yeah, it is nice to be able to just, hey, I'm going to go do this because I want to go. And we're going to go, and nothing's going to end if we're not in the office for 2 days. The world isn't going to end.
No, I don't think I'm that important, which is fine.
I know I'm not.
Reflected in operations here. But it's not to be overlooked either, because a lot of professions, are high paying, but still hourly at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And we've selected ones that aren't, which is great.
Do you feel, I have one thing that I just thought of. Do you feel like, because I think Iowa fans or basketball fans or Caitlin Clark fans feel like they're part of something. from the media side of it, did you feel at any time that we were part of something that the general public did not get to do or did not see? I've had that experience as a concert photographer, as a journalist for a long time. I've always had access to that stuff. I'm just curious to see if you felt that way.
Obviously, we had access, and I would play it up on social media because I had it. At the end of the day, though, it's neat, but the world's not missing out. I mean, you're seeing the clips still.
Yeah.
You're missing out on being in the room, which is important in a lot of cases. There's business lessons there, but in this particular case, no, you might miss some of the emotion that goes along with physically being present, but a lot of it's at that point spinning the story you're given.
True.
You sell what you have. So yes, of course, I got as much mileage and traction out of possible posting, and we took selfies down by the courtside everywhere and posted up.
You made fun of me constantly because I was all about the free food and the free drinks. You're like, you're going back for more? I'm like, yes, I need another round.
As long as they had Diet Coke, I was.
It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a mix of people working behind the scenes too. I do have just a genuine interest in how things operate behind the scenes. So from that standpoint, it was interesting to me. At the end of the day, though, when you really dig in, it is a job and a career for a lot of people, and a very demanding one at that. Because if we were being told to travel somewhere on short notice for an unknown duration, and you're going to be in a windowless room, which I do for conferences, which is funny. I pay to go to those. But, it would be a massive grind.
We were the only journalists there that didn't have a specific deadline. If we posted a story or photo,
to get them
we tried to do, we did. And for the most part, we did. But it wasn't like anyone was, because technically I'm the guy running that part of that organization. I'm like, if we get the story up an hour from now, it's fine.
I mean, it took me a little while, and I developed a groove after a few games of how I would write the story and try and get it.
You would send me the story, and then I would get the photos. We got a system down after a while, so you're hired for next year.
And some of that I stole from watching the other journalists there.
It's true. Yeah, you got to talk because I'm on the court photographing for the most part. You were up in the media, and you got to meet some of these media people. They're interesting, aren't they? I mean, there's some characters.
I mean, there's obviously the ones that are way more knowledgeable than I was, and in depth of histories of programs and celebrities within the individual sport and stuff that I got.
Yeah, but they live and die. But they live and die for that stuff. You're like, I'm going to go home at the end of the day.
But I'm a pretty tactical, analytical guy, so I could also watch how they're writing stories and the fact that they're putting X's in for the scores, but they're going to go ahead and write the ending now so they can push this thing out. Like ESPN Social was really good at pushing like crazy amounts of content. I also noticed a lot of the guys had a software built for media organizations that managed like multiple social media accounts. Like,
and like usual, things that I hear about and know about but never use, and you're like, why aren't you using AI to do those video clips? And so we're sitting in the hotel room, and I'm downloading free trials, and sure enough, like always, Justin Miller's on top of it. I'm like, this just made I produced like 100 times the content in 10 minutes that I was doing on my own. Sitting, you're like, I'm gonna go down to the pool and work on stuff, and I'm like. AI is amazing. I also
noticed some clear violations of the terms of the media pass on other organizations.
Absolutely.
Like you're not supposed to do anything resembling a play-by-play, and that's all everyone does.
Exactly.
Also, I wonder who is watching the games via Twitter.
Exactly. Why would you care?
Or sorry, X.
Or X, yeah.
A lot of people would just...
The same people who had passes who were in the wrong part of the arena, probably. Sir, you can't be here.
These guys look like they were making some sort of ad revenue. They were getting paid.
They could be, yeah.
But next year when I get paid for this,
yeah,
it won't be fun anymore.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
Yeah, right.
I'll get back to you.
All right, so hopefully you found this diversion.
There's a half an hour into our world.
This is what small business is about, though, is being able to follow your interests and your passions a little bit and commingle them as much as possible. I actually like to keep them separate as much as possible. But there are lessons here. There are some that we spoke. There are some that are between what we said. And they're worth taking because at the end of the day, the college basketball program and now WNBA, all they are at the end of the day are massive businesses.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the universities like to be called that, but that they're there to make money. That's what they do. Sporting programs there because it should make money. If it doesn't directly, it does it indirectly.
Mm-hmm.
If they were smarter, they would have sold tickets for $500 instead of $15. But wasn't the game they were playing.
Sure.
So we'll be back to our typical fodder. Episode 51 coming at you shortly. Will be more about dinosaurs because there's been devolution going on here.
Thanks for listening to the Profit 911 podcast. Be sure to subscribe and leave your comments. For more information on how Profit 911 Consulting can help grow your service business, visit profit911.biz.